Welcome to Women in Power Active. I am your host, Jacqueline Gross, and my co-host is Erica Mann, and I'm here with Tiffany Chenault. The first thing I really wanted to talk about, because I love your perspective on running, is kind of like how you got into running.
So I think my story, I was never a runner. I never thought running was for me. I was one of those people like, why are you running? Like, are you being chased? That's just stupid. Like, so when I see people running, I'm like, it's hot. Why are you running? That was me. I was more of, I always categorized myself as like the socialite, the party girl. They're like, that's me. So how do I go from being a kind of a party girl to a runner? And so my story comes from an angle of grief. So I lost my mother in 2011 to cancer. And so, sad time, depressing time, and it just, wasn't myself. And maybe a couple of years later, a friend of mine, I'm still grieving, a friend of mine had asked me to be a part of her relay team. It was a 5 mile relay team. And I never ran, like I said before, but I just wanted to, support my friend. And I said, sure, I'll do this. But I didn't know what do this meant. And so I trained, but my training was I would walk a little bit, run a second, I'm done. So again, never run ever. And so the day of the race, I show up and there's like 5,000 people there. I'm like, oh, people run. And so I remember I had my bib number and I had put it like right above like my neck, like right below my neck. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, this is probably where I shouldn't go. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like, listen, when the gun goes off, just go to the sides and let people go. I'm like, okay. And the race happened, and I thought it was a relay team. I run a little bit, and then someone else would, take over. But apparently, this relay team was you run all 5 miles, which I didn't know anything about. And so running this race, I'm like, there are people everywhere. Like, oh my god! And I didn't study like the race route, so I'm like, why are there hills? Why am I going down a hill? Is there music? I don't understand. Running this race, I'm going to air quote that because I don't know really what happened, but something kind of clicked. So going from losing my mom and probably a couple of years of just being depressed,
Right.
And kind of not having my spirit, not being myself, and just kind of being, right? I'm just going through the motions of life. That in that race, I don't know if it was like endorphins or adrenaline, but I felt like alive. Like I felt feelings. I felt something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm running this race. And when I finished it, my relay team, they were all hanging out, drinking, relaxing. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like, hey, this is great. And my friend's sister had said, why don't you run? We had an all women's 10K race. And I'm like, 10K? I'm like, I can't run 10 miles. What are you like? That's just crazy. And she said, no, a 10K is 6 miles. You just did 5. Oh, because again, it was the things. And I'm like, and it was an all women's race. So again, not knowing anything about running, I'm like, there's an all women's race? Like, what? Like, what? And so I was like, I'll think about it.
Right.
And that kind of got me going. So I started to run in my neighborhood and just kind of I got a little bit of the bug, and that kind of started this journey that I've been on. So long story short, it kind of came from grief, running this race. As a friend just asked me to run, I said, sure. And then yeah.
Did you feel like emotional, like when you're running?
As weird as this may sound, like I actually had feelings. So I think when my mom my mom passed away, I just became numb, right?
Okay.
Numb girl. It was just like this numbness. And I was functioning in the world, not living in the world. So I just was automatic pilot. Just, I got to keep going. I really wasn't grieving. I was holding my grief.
Yeah.
While I was grieving, right? I just didn't let it out. So this whole notion of women being like, strong women, like we're strong women, and we take the pain, and we have to help our community and our family, and yet we don't emote our emotions. So I thought I didn't have permission to grieve because I had to be strong.
Right.
I had to be strong for my father. I had to be strong for my students. But I'm a person. I have feelings, and so not letting that out, holding that in actually made me feel worse. It's kind
Yeah.
of, I equated to kind of like an alcoholic or drug addict. Like people don't know that they are, and someone's like put the mirror up to like, you are, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize I was depressed and grieving because I was. And so through that running, that race, it was the Harpoon 5 miler. Like I just like, I don't know, something tapped into me. And so it was this emotion. And it was like, I felt something.
Yeah.
And after that, when I started to run in my neighborhoods, I would run and I would release my emotions. So I would like cry or talk to my mom or just I would emote feelings while running. And that's something that I hadn't done in the couple years prior. And that kind of got me on this like, oh, okay, this running thing's okay. It's not so bad. So my angle is just through kind of grief and healing. I mean, it was never for time. It was never for like, oh, I need to lose weight, or it wasn't, I hadn't run ever. So I started this, I was 37. I started. So, I mean, very new to this. So that's kind of my entryway into this space.
Yeah.
Do you still get that same emotion when you run now? Or do you use running now for other things, aspects of your life now? Or is it still like an emotional outlet for you?
Actually, it still is an emotional outlet, but now I will always be grieving my mother, right?
Right.
But now it's like for my mental health, because if I don't run, someone's going to get hurt. So now it's like, oh, I need to go for my, like, that's my time. That's my space. That's when I'm like, okay, now let's go. So I notice when I don't run, my admin, like when I go into my office, like she knows before COVID, but she would know when I didn't run, because would ask me like, did you not run today? And I'm like, oh, say that. So it's now become like an emotional and mental release. And just like, yeah. So that's why I run, but I do feel the emotions. There's always emotions. There's always emotions, there's always cursing, there's always something, but it makes me, it's my happy space.
Yeah, you've alluded to students and to your work. What is it that you do?
I'm a college professor.
Yes.
And yes, I'm a doctor that I have earned. So I may not deliver babies, but I'm still a doctor.
That's so cool.
So I'm a sociologist. I teach here at Salem State University in Salem, Massachusetts. And what I study is kind of inequities in society. So I look at inequalities around like race, community, gender, and I've shifted my focus now towards this running space, as I am like running in this space. It is new to me, and I have questions when I run, because I'm running. I'm like, why is running so white? And why aren't there more diverse people of color who run? And I don't understand. And so I'm asking these questions in my head, and being a sociologist, I'm like, well, I have the tools and resources to study this. And I'm really curious. And as I started to kind of study this running space and running culture, that there's not really a lot of information when it comes to women of color running. So normally when you see articles about women running, it's always white women running, but never about women of different racial groups, different, physical disabilities, sexuality. I mean, it's a very homogeneous space. And I was like, but there's so many other people who run, and I didn't see that when I would run, or when I would read some of the magazines like Runner's World and some of the other popular magazines. I'm like, where's me? Where's some diversity? So that kind of got me thinking even more and become kind of more engaged in running. Because I'm like, I'm gonna find people, and I want to know, why aren't there more people?
Yeah.
I was on a mission, so it was kind of like running was my way of healing, my way of just getting my emotions back. But then it became this interesting space because it's a microcosm of society. And I was like, ooh, so all the things that I study, I'm like, it's in this space, and I want to know more about this space. So So that's what I do. I'm kind of studying the sociology of sport, or the sociology of running as I do this.
Super interesting. I know we have talked a lot, but there was several instances, like speaking about running spaces. You have, after running, your first 5K, you've then started running the marathon distance. So you skipped from the 10K to the marathon. What you were, before COVID hit, you were trying to hit every state and do a marathon. Can you tell us a little bit about that goal that you had set for yourself?
Yeah, I'll kind of, more of the backstory.
Yeah, please.
So, ran my first race. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? This is great. And then I ran, it was called the Tufts Women's 10K. So like, ooh, all women's race. And I just started to like run a little bit more, run in my neighborhood. I found a community of Black women's runners, Black girls run. I'm like, oh, and I just started to run. So the more I ran, the more I started to heal. And it was just, I started to kind of get myself back. Yep. And so as I'm doing, I did the 10K, and someone's like, hey, you should probably do a half marathon. Like, that's stupid. I was like, 10K is fine, 6 miles. I'm just getting sweet. They're like, no, you should do a half marathon. I'm like, all right. So I was like, sure. And I was turning 40, and I thought, well, you know what? That would be a great birthday gift for myself.
Yeah.
When I turned 30, again, party girl, when I turned 30, I had like 3 parties over 3 days. I'm doing like 30 shots, getting 30, like that. Again, that was me. So I was like, I can't do that turning 40. I was like, new goal. I'm like, I'll do this thing. I'll run a half marathon when I turn 40. And I trained and did that, and we can talk about that story.
Yeah.
But then me, I'm like, why don't I run 3 more to celebrate every decade? So when I turned 40, I ran 4 half marathons, because that's what you do. And then again, my friends were like, well, you should run a marathon. That's stupid. Why would I run a marathon, right? No desire, no goal. And they're like, well, technically you've run 2. I'm like, over the course of 6 months, right, doing the half marathons. I'm like, marathon, who does that? I don't do that. And see, the conversations that go through my head.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so everyone's always like, oh, because I live in Boston, and like, oh, you can do the Boston Marathon. But I'm a transplant. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, Midwest. Midwest, yes, it's the best.
Yeah.
Went to graduate school in Virginia, and so, and I live up here, so I'm like, I have no really ties to here, even though people are like the Boston Marathon, I'm like, eh. And so if I was going to do one marathon in my life ever, I wanted it to mean something and to be special. And so I'm just looking around, and I saw the Flying Pig Marathon in Cincinnati, Ohio, which that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
And it would be 2 days after I turned 41. I thought, that would be great. That's the one I'm going to do. And so I signed up for it, committed myself. I'm like, I will do that. And I ran for my birthday, first time ever. And I can just tell you the experience of being in your hometown. And I didn't realize the Flying Pig was a very large marathon. I think like 30 something thousand people. I guess everyone.
Wow.
It's very hilly.
Yeah.
And so the emotions there was just crazy. And I'm still learning, like, oh, people drink, like they had like a contest, and they have different like stands, and it was just great. Like, it was the best marathon experience ever. And I was trying to beat Oprah's time. And yes, Oprah ran a marathon back in, I think, 90s Oprah. And I had my friends call me to make sure I wasn't dead. Like, it was this whole experience. It was great.
Wait, while you were running, they were calling you?
Yeah, I had, yeah. They called me, and they're like, how you doing? I'm like, I don't know. Like, at one point to beat Oprah's time. I'm like, okay. No, I did not beat Oprah's time, because I got tired, but I did it. And it was, again, amazing and wonderful. I would do it all over again. And my dad was there, and part of me, I was kind of close to my mom.